The night before my wedding, my fiancé vanished, leaving just one message. Don't look for me. What started as heartbreak turned into the darkest mystery of my life. Watch my story till the end, because love, lies, and truth are never what they seem. I remember the exact moment my life stopped making sense. The night before my wedding. The rain outside my New York apartment hadn't stopped for hours. The city was glowing. Wet pavements, yellow cabs splashing through puddles, the faint sound of sirens that felt oddly cinematic. My dress hung by the window, wrapped in white silk. My phone kept buzzing with congratulations. And then came his voice note. Liv, don't look for me. Just that. 7 words. His voice was shaky, breathless, almost as if he'd been running. Then silence. I replayed it 5 times. Every time, my stomach twisted tighter. My fiancé, Ethan Parker, the man I was supposed to marry in less than 12 hours, had vanished. At first, I thought it was a prank. Or cold feet. Maybe he'd gone out with his best friend for one last drink. But when he didn't pick up my calls, when his best man said he hadn't seen him all day, and when his hotel room came up empty, I knew something was wrong. By midnight, my heart was hammering so loud I could barely think. The police told me to wait 24 hours. His friends said he probably needed space. My mother said, "Sweetheart, men panic before weddings." But Ethan wasn't like that. He was calm, grounded, safe. The kind of man who made promises and kept them. Until that night. By morning, there was no trace of him. No calls. No messages. His phone went straight to voicemail. His car gone. His apartment locked. His job unreachable. I felt like I was engaged to a ghost. And then, when I tried to log into his work email to check if something happened at his firm, I realized something terrifying. There was no record of Ethan Parker working for the investment company he'd claimed for the past 3 years. No employee ID. No profile. Nothing. It was as if he never existed. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. Liv, don't look for me. Those words echoed through me like a haunting. By morning, I was half delirious, still wearing the t-shirt he'd left behind on my couch. I went to his apartment in Midtown, heart pounding with every step. His door was still locked, so I called the building manager. When he opened it for me, I expected to find his usual mess, a coffee mug on the counter, his navy suit jacket tossed over the chair. Instead, the place was stripped bare. No clothes. No photos. No laptop. Just an empty fridge, a single toothbrush, and the faint smell of his cologne. It didn't make sense. Ethan wasn't the kind of man to vanish. He paid his bills on time, kept receipts, labeled his food containers. The kind of man who kissed me on the forehead before I left for work and texted, "Drive safe, Liv." I searched the drawers like a madwoman. Receipts, letters, anything. Then, in the back of a kitchen cabinet, I found a small envelope. My name was written on it in his handwriting. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single key and a note. If something happens to me, go to locker 312, East Side Storage. Trust no one. I froze. Locker 312. What was in there? That was the first time fear turned into obsession. I wasn't just a worried fiancé anymore. I was someone chasing ghosts. I left his apartment and took a cab across town to the storage facility. The attendant asked for ID. When I showed Ethan's note, the man hesitated but finally led me down a narrow corridor that smelled of dust and metal. Locker 312 was halfway down, rusted and unremarkable. I inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside were boxes of documents, neatly stacked. And on top, a brown leather folder. My breath caught when I opened it. Ethan's face stared back at me from multiple driver's licenses, different names. Ethan Parker, James Carter, Daniel Shaw, all with the same photo. He had 3 different identities. My heart pounded so hard I could barely stand. Beneath the IDs were passports, fake business cards, and newspaper clippings about a murder case from 2 years ago, the death of a tech CEO named Mark Weller. And scribbled on the folder in Ethan's handwriting were 4 words. They know about you. I stumbled out of the storage facility, drenched in sweat, my mind spinning.
Who knew about me?
What did that even mean? The note wasn't just a warning, it was a goodbye. I walked out into the sunlight, clutching the folder like it was oxygen. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Not the police, not his friends, not even myself. But deep down, I knew one thing. Ethan hadn't abandoned me. Something or someone had forced him to disappear. And I was going to find out who. The morning after I found the locker, I stopped being the version of myself I recognized. Gone was the woman planning table settings and floral arrangements. In her place stood someone who couldn't stop shaking, watching shadows, questioning every face that lingered too long. New York suddenly felt hostile. Every corner carrying a secret, every stranger possibly watching me. That paranoia began for a reason. Because by midday, someone was watching me. It started at the corner of Lexington Avenue. I caught a reflection in a shop window, a man in a gray coat, maybe 40, pretending to read a newspaper. He wasn't close enough to threaten me, but every time I crossed the street, so did he. I ducked into a coffee shop, heart hammering, pretending to scroll through my phone while keeping him the corner of my eye. When I finally gathered the courage to confront him, he was gone. I thought maybe stress was making me hallucinate. Until later that night, I received a message on my phone from an unknown number. You shouldn't have opened the locker, Olivia. My blood turned to ice. No name. No explanation. Just that sentence. I didn't tell anyone, not my best friend, not the police. I didn't trust anyone anymore. The folder with Ethan's documents was now hidden under the loose floorboard in my bedroom. Every creak in the night made me sit up straight, clutching my phone. The next morning, as I was leaving my apartment, a man stepped out of a black car and blocked my path. He wasn't the one from the gray coat. This one looked cleaner, sharper. Suit, dark eyes, a face that didn't blink enough. Miss Adams, he said. I froze. Who are you? He flashed an ID card so fast I barely saw it. Detective Lang, NYPD. You were engaged to Ethan Parker? Yes. We need to talk. His tone wasn't comforting. It was more controlling. He gestured toward his car, and every instinct in me screamed no. I can meet you at the station, I said. His expression tightened. We'd prefer somewhere private. That's when I saw it, a faint tattoo on his wrist as he adjusted his sleeve. A triangle symbol, exactly like the one I'd seen drawn on the back of one of Ethan's fake passports. He wasn't a cop. Sorry, I muttered and stepped back, but before I could turn, his hand brushed my arm. Ethan isn't who you think he is, he whispered. He lied to you. About everything. I yanked free and ran. People on the street barely looked up as I sprinted into the nearest subway station, my lungs burning, heart beating like it would explode. I rode random trains for nearly an hour, switching lines, watching reflections, praying he hadn't followed me. When I finally got home, shaking, I realized something that made me drop to the floor. The folder from under the floorboard was gone. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, numb, staring at the empty space where my only proof had been. Someone had been inside my apartment, and they wanted me to stop looking. But it was already too late. I was in too deep now, too many lies, too many questions. That night, as I sat alone by the window, the city buzzing beneath me, my phone buzzed again. It was a voice note. His voice. Live if you love me. Don't trust anyone, especially the police. Then static. And in the background, faintly a gunshot. After that voice note, I couldn't move for what felt like hours. The sound of that gunshot played on a loop in my head, carving fear into my bones. He was alive, or at least he had been. And he'd confirmed what I already suspected. The police were not on my side.
But why?
Ethan wasn't a criminal. He was quiet, careful, brilliant. The kind of man who remembered my coffee order, who once stayed up until 2 a.m. building IKEA furniture because he didn't want me to wake up to chaos. He wasn't someone who ran from weddings and left coded notes in storage units. Unless he had no choice. I couldn't go to the police. I couldn't stay home. So I did the only thing I could. I went back to his office building. The receptionist looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "I'm sorry, there's no employee named Ethan Parker here." I showed her his photo. Desperate. He worked here. He had an ID badge. A desk. "I came for lunch here once." She frowned. "Ma'am, this company opened 6 months ago." I don't know who that is. 6 months ago. But Ethan and I had been together for 3 years. It was like his entire life before the wedding had been erased. That night, I scoured old messages, photos, everything. He'd never tagged himself online. His phone number was prepaid. Even the apartment lease was under another name, James Carter. Then, buried deep in one of our text threads, I noticed something strange, a link he'd once sent me to a charity gala last year. It had seemed random at the time, but when I clicked it again, the page was gone. So I went digging through archived pages online. And there it was, a photo of the event. The gala was hosted by Weller Technologies, the same company whose CEO, Mark Weller, had been found dead 2 years ago. And in the background of one photo,
Ethan.
Standing beside Mark Weller.
Smiling.
Wearing a name tag that said Daniel Shaw. My chest tightened. Ethan wasn't some bystander. He'd known the murdered man. I printed the photo and pinned it on my wall, tracing the faces. There were 2 other men in that shot. One of them looked vaguely familiar. It took me an hour to realize why. He was the same man who'd pretended to be Detective Lang. My knees went weak. Whoever Ethan had been involved with, they were powerful, organized, and watching me. I needed help. But the only person I could think of was Liam, Ethan's best friend, the one who'd introduced us years ago. He'd been quiet since Ethan's disappearance, avoiding my calls. So I showed up at his office unannounced. When he saw me, his expression flickered from surprise to fear. "Olivia," he said, standing up quickly, "you shouldn't be here." "Liam, where is he?" I demanded. "What's going on?"
Who are these people?
He hesitated, looking at the door as if someone might be listening. Finally, he whispered, "You need to leave New York."
Right now. What? No.
"I'm not going anywhere until you tell me the truth." He rubbed his face, shaking. Ethan was working undercover. The name Ethan Parker, it wasn't real. He was part of an internal investigation. Weller Technologies was a front for laundering money through shell charities. He got too close. Someone found out. My mind spun. Undercover? For who? "I can't say," he muttered. "But he wasn't supposed to fall in love with you. That's why they went after him. You were the weakness they used." I stumbled back, trying to process it. He stayed with me to protect me? Liam's eyes were heavy with guilt. He disappeared to save your life. The world tilted beneath me. Everything, the lies, the fake names, the warning, it all suddenly made sense. Ethan had been living in shadows, and I'd been in the center of a storm without knowing it. But before I could ask another question, Liam's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face drained of color. "Liv, they found him." The words, "they found him," hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed Liam's arm. "What do you mean they found him? Where?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes darted to the window, then back to me. "Lower East Side. An abandoned warehouse near Pier 27. But Olivia, you can't go there. If they know he tried to contact you, I don't care." I snapped. "If he's alive, I have to see him. Liv, please." But I was already halfway out the door. The taxi ride to Pier 27 felt endless. The city flashed by in streaks of neon and rain. My hands trembled on my lap as I listened again to Ethan's last message, his voice cracking, that haunting echo. "Don't trust anyone." The warehouse loomed ahead, a gray skeleton of rust and broken windows, half hidden behind construction tape. My stomach twisted, but I pushed through the fence anyway. Inside, it smelled of oil and decay. Faint moonlight poured through holes in the roof, glinting off puddles on the concrete floor. And then I saw him. He was sitting against a pillar, hands tied, face bruised, but alive. "Ethan," I whispered. His head jerked up. When his eyes met mine, they filled with shock and fear. "Liv? No, no. What are you doing here?" Tears blurred my vision as I ran to him. "You disappeared. You left me. I thought you were dead." He shook his head frantically. "You shouldn't be here. They're watching."
Who?
"Ethan, what is this?" He looked at me with such pain that it broke something inside me. "They're not who you think they are. The people I worked for, they weren't cleaning up corruption. They were creating it. And when I found out, they decided I was expendable." My breath caught. "Then who's behind it?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Liam." I froze. "No," Liam said. "I know what he said," Ethan interrupted, his voice shaking. "He's been their handler from the start. He recruited me, fed me lies, made me believe I was serving justice. But I found files about you, about your father." "My father?" Ethan nodded weakly. "Before he died, he worked for Weller Technologies, right? He didn't quit. He was silenced. He tried to expose what was happening. And now they think you have his data, the missing drive." I shook my head in disbelief. "I don't have anything. They don't believe that. They think he left it to you. That's why I stayed close. At first, it was an assignment. Then his voice broke. Then it became real. My chest caved in. You fell in love with me."
He smiled, barely.
That was the only part that wasn't a lie. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the far end of the warehouse. Ethan's eyes widened.
"Go, Liv."
"Run." I turned just as flashlights cut through the darkness. 3 men, one of them Liam. His expression was cold, detached. "I told you not to come here," he said. "Liam, why?" I whispered. He stepped forward slowly, gun in hand. "Because you were never supposed to know any of this." Ethan couldn't let go. He thought he could save you. "You used him," I said bitterly. Liam's mouth twitched. "Everyone's used for something. Even you." He lifted the gun. Ethan surged forward, breaking free from his restraints, shouting, "Run, Liv." A gunshot exploded through the air. I screamed. Ethan staggered, then fell. For a moment, everything stopped. The world, my breath, the rain outside. I dropped to my knees beside him. His hand reached for mine, trembling. "Locker 312, he gasped. "There's another key, hidden under the false bottom." "Ethan, please." His eyes met mine, soft and full of the same love I'd seen 100 times before. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, but you'll know the truth now. About everything." Then his hand went still. Liam's voice echoed distantly. "Take care of it." The next thing I remember is running through the rain, my hands covered in his blood, clutching his ring. I didn't stop until the sirens were far behind me. And as the city blurred past, one thought burned in my mind. They killed him for something my father started. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was part of the story. And I was going to finish what Ethan died to uncover. By morning, Ethan's death was on every news channel, but not the truth. The headline said fugitive found dead after exchange of gunfire. They called him a criminal, a fraud. They didn't mention that he'd been set up, that the man who shot him worked for the people writing the headlines. I stared at the screen in silence, numb, my coffee untouched. The city outside my window buzzed as if nothing had happened, but inside, everything had changed. Ethan was gone, but he'd left me a mission. "Locker 312, he'd said. The false bottom." I went back to the storage unit just after dawn. The attendant didn't even look up when I passed. Maybe he'd seen enough strange things not to care. When I opened the locker again, it was emptier than before. Someone had clearly searched through it, but they hadn't noticed the thin crack at the base of the metal shelf. I pried it open with a screwdriver and found a small, flat USB drive wrapped in paper. The note said only one thing: for Olivia. Finish what he couldn't. It wasn't Ethan's handwriting. It was my father's. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop back in my apartment. At first, the drive looked empty until a single folder appeared titled Project Meridian. Inside were hundreds of files: bank transfers, shell companies, lists of politicians and corporate partnerships. Money moving from fake charities into offshore accounts. The biggest laundering scheme I'd ever seen. And one document stopped my heart completely. Investigator: Ethan Parker, alias. Handler: Liam H. Grant. There it was, black and white proof of everything he'd said. He'd been part of something real, something dangerous, and it had swallowed him whole. As I scrolled through the rest of the files, a video thumbnail caught my eye. I clicked it. My father appeared on screen. Older than I remembered, his face tired, his voice trembling. If you're seeing this, Liv, they found me. Weller Technologies isn't what it seems. They fund disappearances. Kill for silence. Ethan tried to stop them. They used me to control him. Don't trust anyone. Find the leak inside the bureau. It's closer than you think. Then the video cut out. I sat there frozen, tears spilling down my cheeks. The man I'd lost when I was 16 hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered. And Ethan had known. I spent the next few hours copying everything to a secure cloud, encrypting it. Every click felt like a war drum in my chest. I knew I was being watched. I could feel it. Then, just as I finished, my doorbell rang. I froze. Through the peephole, I saw Liam. He wasn't even pretending to hide anymore. He looked calm, almost polite. Holding a coffee cup like this was just another morning. Olivia, he called softly. Let's talk. You have something that doesn't belong to you. I backed away from the door. You killed him, I whispered to myself. You killed them both. Open the door, he said, his tone sharper now. We can make this easy. I grabbed my phone and slipped through the back stairwell instead. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the drive. I didn't know where I was running to. I just knew I couldn't stay. By the time I reached the street, the sky was gray, heavy with rain. I melted into the crowd, my hood up, my heart racing. I had no one left to trust, no one except Ethan's last words. Don't trust anyone, especially the police. But I wasn't ready to disappear. Not like him. I was going to expose them, every single one of them. That night, from a cheap motel room in Brooklyn, I created a new email address and sent the Project Meridian files to every major journalist and whistleblower contact I could find. Then I sent one final message to Liam. You shouldn't have underestimated me. You taught me how to look for the truth, and I found it. I hit send and stared out at the rain, trembling, angry, alive. But as I packed up the USB drive, something strange caught my eye, a line of code buried in the last folder Ethan had left. It was labeled Olivia_redacted. I opened it. Inside was a single document. Subject: Olivia Adams, protected witness. Status: hidden identity. Father: Mark Weller. My blood ran cold. My father was the man Ethan was investigating. For a long time, I just stared at the screen. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. Subject: Olivia Adams, protected witness. Status: hidden identity. Father: Mark Weller. Mark Weller. The man Ethan was investigating. The man murdered 2 years ago. The man I thought was just another headline. But my father's name was David Adams, wasn't it? I dug through my purse, through the photo I'd carried for years, me on his shoulders at Coney Island. The face was the same. The smile was the same. But when I looked closer, something in me shifted. The hair color,
The jawline.
subtle, but undeniable. My hands trembled as I opened another file on the drive, a series of scanned birth certificates, all stamped with different agencies' seals. Mine was among them. There, in black and white, Olivia Weller. Date of birth, mother's name, everything matched, except the last name. They'd changed it. Suddenly, every hole in my past made sense. Why my father never talked about his work. Why we moved apartments every year. Why my mother burned letters in the kitchen sink when I was 8. They weren't paranoid. They were hiding. And after he was killed, someone, maybe even the bureau Ethan once worked for, had changed my name, buried my records, and given me a new life. Only now that life was unraveling. I felt sick. I wanted to scream, to wake up in another timeline where I wasn't the daughter of a murdered whistleblower, where my fiancé wasn't dead because of a truth that had started with me. Instead, I sat frozen in the motel room, listening to the rain beat against the window, the city's hum just beyond reach. That's when my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. You are never supposed to find out who you are. My breath hitched. Liam, I whispered. Then another message. Meet me. 1 hour. Hudson Pier. Come alone. Or everyone who has your file dies. I almost dropped the phone. My mind spun journalists, contacts, innocent people who now had the Meridian files.
He was threatening them.
And I knew he would follow through. I stared at the USB drive in my hand, the one that held everything. My father's truth, Ethan's death, my stolen identity. And I made a decision. I was going to the pier. Not to negotiate. To end it. The Hudson wind cut through my coat as I walked along the empty pier. The water below was dark, endless. Liam was waiting at the edge, half hidden by fog. His hands were in his pockets, the same calm mask as always. I knew you'd come, he said softly. You killed Ethan, I said. You killed my father. He tilted his head. Killed? Such a heavy word. Let's call it containment. Containment, I repeated, trembling. They were human beings.
He sighed.
You don't understand, Olivia. Your father built Meridian.
He started it.
The laundering, the offshore webs, the politics. He wanted to control the system, and when it spun out of control, he tried to expose it. But it was too late. So yes, we buried him. And we gave you a new life because you were a liability. My voice cracked. You're lying. Am I? He asked, stepping closer. You think Ethan fell in love with you by accident? You were his mission, Liv. He was supposed to bring you in, until he didn't. That's why I had to clean it up. I shook my head, tears burning. He loved me. I'm sure he did, Liam said, his expression almost kind. But love doesn't erase history. You're your father's daughter. You're the key that can destroy everything we built or rebuild it. Then he held out his hand. Give me the drive. You can disappear again. New name. New life. Or... He glanced toward the water. You can die like them. I took a step closer, my heart pounding. You know, Liam, Ethan told me once that secrets rot the people who keep them. He smiled faintly. Then I guess I'm already rotten. I held up the drive, small, silver, humming with everything they'd tried to bury. It's already gone. Uploaded. Every file. Every name. It's over. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. You're bluffing. Try me. He lunged forward, but I was faster. I threw the drive into the water with all the strength I had. It vanished beneath the surface, swallowed by the dark. Liam stared at me, breathing hard. You think that saves you? No, I said, meeting his gaze. It saves them. He stepped closer, fury twisting his face. But before he could move, a voice shouted from behind. Drop the weapon. Floodlights exploded across the pier. Agents in black swarmed out of the shadows, guns drawn. Liam turned, stunned. A woman in a trench coat approached, badge raised.
FBI.
It's over, Grant. I staggered backward, the world spinning. Liam laughed, bitter. You'll never bury this. Meridian isn't a project. It's an empire. And then, before anyone could reach him, he turned the gun on himself. A single shot echoed across the water. Then silence. I stood there, shaking, surrounded by agents and noise and chaos, but all I could think about was Ethan. The man who lied to me. The man who loved me. The man who died to save the truth, and me. And in that moment, I realized the real twist wasn't that my life had been built on lies. It was that love had somehow survived them. It had been 3 weeks since the night on the pier. The city had moved on, headlines replaced by newer scandals, newer lies. But I couldn't. I was still living out of a suitcase in a government safe house, drinking burnt coffee every morning, staring out a window that faced a brick wall. The agents called it protection. To me, it felt like another kind of prison. The world now knew the truth about Meridian, the money laundering network my father had once built, then tried to destroy. The files I released were everywhere: congressional hearings, leaked documents, faces on the news. But the truth had a price. Ethan was gone, and so was the future I thought I had. One rainy morning, Agent Parker, the woman who'd led the operation, came to see me. She was holding a small, sealed envelope. "This came from evidence storage," she said. "Found in Ethan Grant's car, hidden in the lining of the glove box. It's addressed to you." My throat tightened. My hands trembled as I took it. Inside was a USB drive. No label, no markings. Just one file. I plugged it into my laptop, my pulse wild in my ears. And then his voice filled the room. "Hey, Liv. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it.
And I'm sorry."
God, I'm so sorry. I pressed a hand over my mouth as tears blurred my vision. I lied to you about who I was. I lied because I thought I could fix everything before it touched you. I was sent to find you, to monitor you, but then I met you, and I realized the woman they described wasn't real. You were real. You were the only good thing in my life that wasn't built on a cover story." His voice broke slightly. "When I found out your father was still alive, I had a choice: hand you over, or protect you. So I made a deal. My freedom for your safety. That's why I disappeared. They were never after me, Liv. They were after you." I gasped. My heart stopped. "Still alive? I don't know where he is, or if he'll ever surface again. But if this message reaches you, it means he wanted you to know he didn't abandon you either. He loved you, in his own broken way." There was silence for a few seconds. Then softly, "You once told me that love isn't about promises, it's about presence. So if you ever wonder where I am, look for me in every truth you uncover, every lie you refuse to believe. That's where I'll be." I sat there, the rain drumming against the window, the world both too quiet and too loud. He was gone, but he'd left me something stronger than his presence.
A direction.
A reason. And if my father was really alive, then this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of another search. 3 days later, I stood at the edge of the Brooklyn Bridge, the USB drive clenched in my hand. I whispered into the wind, "Wherever you are, Ethan, thank you for teaching me how to fight." Then I dropped the drive into the river, watching it sink beneath the surface, the last secret between us. For the first time in months, I didn't feel haunted. I felt free. Because maybe the past doesn't die. Maybe it just waits for someone brave enough to face it. And this time, that someone was me. A month later, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a photo, an old wooden cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. On the back, a single line written in Ethan's handwriting. "He's waiting." Sometimes, love isn't meant to last forever. It's meant to open your eyes. Ethan didn't stay in my life, but he made me see the truth. That freedom begins the moment you stop running from who you are.